Hi there. So we are still talking about, very excitedly, emotional intelligence, EQ. And we've been reviewing specifically the model developed by Travis Bradbury. So we've dived deeply into self-awareness, which is that first phase. That's like the basement, the foundation of having a really strong EQ. Then we talked specifically about self-management, managing ourselves. After we're aware of ourselves, how do we manage those emotions that we've recognized, those feelings that we've recognized? And then we've talked about specifically beyond that, being aware of our relationships, aware of the other person in the social context, in those social interactions. How do we make sure that we are identifying where they are, how they're feeling, and what their needs are? And so today we're going to graduate to relationship management, managing that relationship. So at this point, the assumption is, and obviously there is no perfection at any of these phases before we go to the next, it's just really how it all ties together. But we're going to now focus on managing those relationships. And the way to manage the relationship, obviously in an excellent way, is one, to be aware of who we are, how we're showing up, how we're reacting in different contexts with different people. For two, to be able to control and manage how we show up and how we respond to the feelings that we have and how we're feeling and expressing ourselves. And then thirdly, we have mastered, hopefully at this point, how we are identifying other people, what their needs are, and how they're responding to who we are and what their triggers are. And then we can get to this point of managing now this relationship with the other people. So what are some ways, some strategies for us to do that? Firstly, it's to continue being open. So we talked about that listening, how important that is. Listen to the other person, to give them eye contact, to recognize who they are by using their name often. Well, going beyond that, it's important to appreciate who they are. So we see who they are, we know who they are. How are we appreciating who they are? How are we being open about how this person may feel or think that may be very different from our own? Are we being curious about it? Do we want to learn more than what we already know about that person? Are we showing that curiosity to them? And then we also want to be very cognizant of how we're communicating to them, because each person appreciates a different style of communication. Some people want very direct communication and they don't want any, ifs, ands. They want to know the truth and the whole truth. I'm that type of person. I prefer you to be direct and honest with me. But then there are other people who they want you to basically break it to them gently in maybe 3 parts and 4 different conversations. And sometimes they want to do that. Sometimes they want to play to the other person's needs and how they need that communication to happen in order for the relationship to be at its optimal way, understanding how that person wants to be communicated to and acquiescing to that can take the relationship a long way. Another way of managing a good relationship is being able to receive feedback well. Sometimes we receive feedback, especially if it's feedback that we're not aware of, it can sting out, right? It can hurt. But for those of us who have high EQs, it's going to be important for us to be able to identify not only what we see as gaps, but appreciate what other people see as gaps. Recognizing that these people are important in our lives, being able to appreciate what they see as gaps and addressing those gaps is going to be really, really important. And accord, building trust in a relationship is really important. And that building trust looks very differently in different relationships. But it's going to be important that we focus on building trust by being consistent. That's a great way of building trust. If we're showing up in a different way every time we see someone, it's difficult, quite frankly, for them to trust who we are if we're not consistent in how our emotions are showing up, if we're not consistent in what we say we're going to do or not. It's tough for them to trust us. Another good way to manage a relationship is to be accessible. Some people call it in the workplace environment an open door policy. But it's important for you to be accessible to individuals, to say, hey, I'm here if you want to talk about how that conversation went, or just to learn more about me and I share more about you. That accessibility is very important in managing and building a relationship. Another good way of managing a relationship is complimenting their emotions, acknowledging their emotions. We talked a lot in the self-awareness video about how important it is for us to give ourselves permission to feel. Well, it's equally important for us to give others permission to feel the way that they do. And then we talked earlier today about how important it is for us to receive feedback. It's also important for us to give feedback. When we're in a relationship that's important, it's a good idea to give positive feedback, to be direct and to be constructive in that feedback. Of course, relationships are different. And so the difference of those relationships is going to determine how highly valued that feedback is. If you, for example, are just walking in the grocery store and you see someone random, you don't want to give them feedback about, hey, at least I wouldn't, you talk too loudly, or you shouldn't wear orange pants, or whatever your feedback you think may be. If the person doesn't know you, obviously the feedback might be inappropriate. But if you're in a relationship, working relationship, a personal relationship with someone, be generous with them, generous enough with them to give feedback. And yes, there's a risk in giving feedback. There always is. But what it does is it opens up another level of intimacy in the relationship. It gives more genuineness in the relationship, which enables you to more so connect in a very real way. And similar to giving feedback, lastly, be intentional about whatever you say. Whatever you say, whoever you're talking to, be intentional about it. Yes, you have those tough conversations, but make sure that you are owning the power of your words, own what you say and own how you say it. And sometimes it is just time to have a tough conversation. Sometimes it's inevitable. So we don't want to be unrealistic in thinking that every conversation is going to be of butterflies and cotton candy. Some conversations are going to sting, whether you're on the receiving end or the giving end or both. But even in those very important types of conversations, you still want to own how you're showing up, how you're giving yourself, and how you're receiving, because that's going to be important for that relationship in the long term. I really hope that you've benefited from this EQ series, and I hope that you are able to apply some things that you've learned. If you've heard any of this information before, I hope that they were great reminders. And feel free to share with others and to like if you do like this information, because then that will obviously fix it so that you'll get more of this type of information. Have a great day. Bye-bye.